Josh Morton, active shooter canine. Today I'm going to go over the secret. How is it to get out of primordial pleasure, desired base canine training? And what is it? I call it the void. And what is this type of training? It is possession. It is taking the canine away from its true self. The more possession that it has, the more furthest away from its true self. And we'll get into that as we dive down into this. But this egoic based canine training is utilized through equipment, luring food, ball, verbal praises, anything that establishes happiness that is acquired from the outside vessel of the canine. Mimics its true self. That to get to that happiness, that emotion of happiness that doesn't last, comes with confusion, frustration, high titration, dullness, emptiness, non understanding, all to get to the suit, all to possess the ball. That's what primordial pleasure training is. This egoic based canine training works in a controlled environment. And what happens is that through repetition, through conditioning, through expectations, predictability, and we're talking canine, we're creating a momentum of a loop of conditioning. And then law enforcement, military, search and rescue, working dogs, they go to a neutral state, which I'll call the universe, and they try to work organically in a neutral state. And this is where the accidents happen. So your muscle memory that you are tuning into the canine's frequency goes out to the neutral state, and then there's mistakes. This egoic based training is unstable at best. And you're using a bunch of words to justify your actions or justify your canine's actions. Because there's no alignment whatsoever. And so we use intellect, we use science to back the reasoning behind of what it is that you're doing. So you'll go to Google and you'll find things that resonate or that align with your actions, which is very simple. And then you will hear to other trainers and other personnel in likeliness of being on the same vibration. But yet, within the void, you always get another dog. And you say you're going to do something different. Things will be better. But truly, is it? You get a third dog. Sure, you apply lessons learned from the previous dog, the previous actions in a neutral state. But are you really understanding the deeper lesson? And that's why in the void, there's trainers that come and go. Because it's just tricks to buy you the time and allow to have that dog understand what the trick is, and then you end up going right back to the loop. Okay. That's about enough for Primordial Pleasure. So, what is the secret? The most important thing of this process is the environment. When I say the environment has an essence, has a vibration of fear of the unknown through thresholds, through hallways, through small rooms, through big rooms. But when you look at this hallway with 10 doors, and then you see the potential of an X intersection, or you see the potential of a T intersection that runs into another hallway with 8 to 10 doors, that runs into small rooms, that runs into big rooms. So within this training environment, you have 30 plus thresholds that I call portals. Within each portal, there is another dimension. Yes, and that dimension might be an empty space. That dimension might be other beings inside. That dimension might be full of objects. And then you have lighting that is dimmable, or lighting that tends to fluctuate. And we'll get into this here in a second. We'll get into this. But within each threshold, the threshold is raised a certain level, so that way it draws the attention organically within the environment. Canine's visual perception down, because that's where odor, when a door is closed, odor could either come through, but we've got to draw attention to the portal. And if you dim, or if you shut off a light in a hallway and then turn on a light in that room on the other side, there's the light, and it draws the attention down organically. And then within that room is another room. Within that room, there's another room. There's no dead end. And establishes flow, because the whole point of this environment is to rewire the dog's brain. All the generational trauma, all the habitual behavior, all past experiences, all expectations, all predictabilities. There is a machine in the music arena, it's like it goes on the desk, and then you have multiple levels, volume controls, all these dials. It's like, think about it, each one of these rooms has cameras. Some rooms have specific cameras in different angles, but every room, every hallway has cameras. And these cameras are linked into the control center, into this volume control center. And literally, it's on a TV in the classroom. Like I said, it's called the control center. Just think about it. The vessel of the canine, the body of the canine. The control center, the senses, audio stimulation, visual stimulation, touch, smell, taste. The senses of the canine is in this control center, which is ultimately the body. Is linked into this TV, and you're able to slow down time and understand every moment every flow, every what's going on in the canine's essence is through this control center. That's why these cameras are so important. And this is nothing that's crazy, because at the end of the day, there are trainers, canine trainers, that actually can slow down time within themselves. So this is nothing that is outside the fence. Within this environment, we have our control center, we have our volumes and everything. I'll get into that here in a second. But within this, we have a decoy. The decoy is typically, yes, trains the dog, but not in this particular case. When you are rewiring the canine's brain, we have to place characters there that hits deep within the canine, that trigger responses that we must allow to unfold. So this is my point. Sometimes it is not beneficial to have decoys that express themselves in, I have a lot of bite suit work, I have a lot of work, I've been doing this for, and these individuals are outstanding, and sometimes subconsciously they try to help the dog, even though they were told not to. So the decoy, and to take this for what it's worth, sometimes it's best paying the guy up in town $100 a day to come down, because you get the best feedback, true feedback. And they do what it is that you ask them to do within reason. That they don't go above and beyond. Now, this is why we have cameras there, because the perception of what somebody says and sees in the dog may be different than what I am looking for in a deeper sense. So we have cameras there to back information, but also too, the decoy is very important. The decoy is there to allow things to unfold. And then when the canine is ready, and then proceeds to do specific things into the next wiring session that doesn't require a reset. It just flows into specific rooms, into organically. And that's what this environment is. The environment trains the dog. Sure, we set up the environment through the control center, because when a dog comes in, it's already, the control center is already set. And what that looks like is, you just cap off a hallway. Yes, cap off a hallway, and you have your doors in. And once again, it's the scene, because typically you send these dogs in organically by themselves. I'll get to the handler later on. This canine goes down the hallway in this environment, and yes, typically they're in a state of confusion, and it doesn't matter where these dogs come from. Why is that? It's because the environment, the essence of the environment, is instilling something. Not on top of that. So now you have your environment. Now you put on a muzzle. Making sure that it's properly fit, of course, that's another day. You put on a muzzle. It doesn't matter what the canine's experiences have been in a muzzle. Not interested. And it's understood, the fact that the canine's never worn a muzzle. Understood. And which, by the way, this entire process is no suit, no equipment, nothing. And an entire sustainment, there is no suit, no equipment, no ball reward, no commands, nothing. We'll get into the sustainment later. But from here on out, there is no suit work. It is all muzzle. And here we go. The canine's released. And now the control center starts to sustain itself. Typically, the canine will go through expectations. It's in a state of confusion because it doesn't know what's happening. It's going off the coded wiring that has been programmed. And it will appear to be lost. Once again, the dog is in a state of confusion. Through the environment, we start getting a standard, a stabilization, right? Where the dog is in alignment with its body, mind, spirit, and soul. That's what this control center is. It is the canine. And then as in this control center, you watch these dogs, you start seeing these levels start setting themselves. It's like, okay. And yes, typically, these high possession canines, typically it's on one level. We all know what it is. It's visual stimulation. It's all the way up. That's typically what happens. So what do? You start dimming the lights. You start dimming the world. And you let this world teach the canine through light, through darkness, through audio stimulation, touch, feeling. You let this world rewire the dog's brain, and the dog will go through its confusion stages with the decoy, with this, with that, throughout this whole process. And this whole process, by the way, is 2 minutes. It may feel like days, but we're slowing down time. And we're allowing the dog to work through, I think I was starting to get at it, the expectations, predictability. Once when that just resonates, pulls through, collapses, and then now you have your past. All behavior. And it doesn't work in this world. So then canine's in confusion. I know it seems repetitive, but I've got to work this out. And doors turn into rooms, rooms turn into rooms, and then we start having a little bit of flow. And then once when the canine meets the decoy, there is once again a state of confusion. What is it that I do? And you have to allow the dog's triggers right, so you've got to allow the confusion to roll through. And then at some point, there's an aha moment. The aha moment doesn't come right now, but I'm just giving you a prelude to an aha moment. Because what happens is the dog will start showing the addiction. And what's that mean? It will show through the muzzle possession. So it will wrap, or if the decoy is laying on the ground, the dog will kind of lay on top of the decoy and just be in this state of confusion. But the addiction is expressing itself. And at this point, there's no aha moment because there's no relative response that the canine has an understanding. So it's still in a state of confusion, but it's more of showing its addiction, and it's just going back all the way to what it knows, and that's possession. And at this time, once again, every moment, this control center is starting to align. But sometimes we have to show complete confusion through the senses, here and here and here. We've got to allow that canine to work through that. And then all of a sudden we start changing things. And when the canine understands that's not it, that you go here and you go here. And to do this, sometimes a session is 20 seconds. Sometimes a session is a minute. Sometimes a session is so confused that the canine lays down in confusion. Maybe it tries to make a choice to leave. And maybe it's allowed at that time. And where it goes, I'll go here in a second. But when we see the gold nugget of the addiction, we start rewiring the environment into what I call intro to muzzle, into states that I call slingshots. It adds understanding, it adds clarity, and it adds excitement. That's what the slingshots do. It shows understanding on an emotional side, not on blinders. Not having blinders on and being so numb and not sensitive to anything besides the end state. That's what slingshots do, because it's through emotion. It's not through tricks of happiness, of a feeling that will subside, as opposed to internally feeling clarity, internally feeling excitement. And the reasonings I'll get you, we'll continue on to that. So in these slingshots, we are developing frustration. There is frustration, and a lot of these dogs at this time, the fight style, because there's 3 fight styles. There's primordial anger, primordial fight, and then there's an emotional fight. And primordial anger, it is based out of frustration, it's based out of confusion. So we get a lot of that on these high possessions in this stage. But the more slingshots that you do, and the slingshots could come from the environment itself, and I'll tell you, through longer barks at doors, or through the feeling, which is the harness from a handler of some sort, and also too from the decoy, just push-offs, but there's subtle push-offs, just creating, you can say drive is what I hear a lot in Primordial Pleasure, but I say it's clarity, it's understanding. You're creating, a slingshot is understanding, it is clarity, because it's in an emotional state. And yes, in primordial anger, it tends to be reactive, meaning the fighting tends to be reactive, and you get through that. The dogs will get through that, some over time, because there is a lot of residue from this past vibration that carries over that these canines exhibit, which would be your triggers. And sometimes the triggers are not from the state of the environment in the sense of the bite work. Some of it has to do with the generational trauma. That means epigenetics. That means things that are within the DNA of that canine that you think of, you're erasing the lines, but the lines are still there. The lines are still there. They can go away, but we'll get into that here later on. So some of these dogs will maintain primordial anger, but as the frustration goes through and it turns in an emotional state, and now we start having, it maybe stems from primordial anger, but it turns into an emotional fight because of understanding the process. Because what's the process? As this control center goes up, down, boom, boom, now this environment shines light on within, that's trapped in this DNA, is what I call primordial hunt. And primordial hunt is the control center. Primordial hunt is hunt through all the senses without not having a likeliness to one sense. That's cutting corners, that's easy to get to. I'm referring to a prey or a visual stimulation, movement stimulation, which that's like the primordial pleasure. That's just the state that I see. And I'm not going to say there's not good dogs in there. There's potential. There's potential. But true primordial hunt is in the senses, is in this control center. And within the environment, when a canine has primordial hunt, utilizing all the senses, manipulated through the environment, that's understanding the process. That's the specialized being. That a department, that the military, that a home protection with no expectations. That's the essence of the canine. The control center, I know I'm being very repetitive, but you got to hear me out. The control center is the motion. Even though I did state literally it's the body, right? It's the body. But its essence is motion. Its spirit is motion. That's flow. That's divine communication. That's without thought. Because in an ego-based primordial pleasure, if you were thinking in a neutral state, you're too late. We have to rewire the canine's brain to understand this dimension. And what dimension? If you're not looking at the video, I'll try to explain it. The dimension is your heart is here in the center. Not here what you've been told is in the center. This dimension. This is where telepathy resides. This is where flow resides. Is in the center of the body. You will see naturally that in this vibration, canines tend to do less extremity work and do more engagement here in the front. Because that's the vibration that they're in. That's the dimension that they're in. Once when this primordial hunt is activated, you have the last stage is oneness. What comes with oneness? Everything that I just said. Flow, synchronicity. Synchronicity is your control. Telepathy, which is being on the same wavelength as your canine. The canine is in a state of knowing, which is the middleman in this neutral state between the universe and you. All of a sudden, changes of behavior become more like symbols. Changes of behavior seems to be whispers, subtle movements that you're able to be in touch with, in tune with, harmonize with. Being in the present moment. That's oneness. There's no projections in the environment. Canines are a reflection of the environment. And we're going to get into this because the oneness now we talk about the muzzle work. I talked about the portal going to the outside. The muzzle work continues to tracking. Not on the fight side, but on the hunt side. Remember, we activated Primordial Hunt. So it doesn't matter. The muzzle is on this control center. It is not activated from the outside realities. The harness is put on this control center. That is not activated. It can be through leashes, through hands, but in turn, it's not activated when you put the harness on. So during detection, muzzle is utilized. Article search, muzzle is utilized. Obedience, muzzle is utilized. It doesn't have to be, but it is important too that in every facet of the canine's job that the muzzle is acquired. Because conditioning is important when you do sustain. I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying that conditioning is not important. I'm not saying sight pictures are not important, but they're on deeper levels. And what sustainment looks like is more not sight picture training, but choices. Because when you have a suit on and the canine is in possession, is in a possessive state, furthest away from its true self, it has no choice. You put a suit on, the dog has no choice. You say he does, but the canine is unaware, unconscious. That's why you have to do one for ones. That's why you have to work bite release. And you're just creating the canine to be further away from its true self. So you go through the process of your recalls. If it's in certifications, that will be another day, right? And I understand some certifications, most all, require definitely not this. My certification obviously doesn't require a suit because we're looking in a deeper. We're in a whole nother dimension with these dogs. That's what's important. So it's understood that your department has sport dog certifications that require a suit. And over time, you being the evidence, that will change. Because deployments will change. I'm going to get into this. But the sustainment, how you do a certification, nothing changes. The difference is that you don't have a suit. Understood, and during the certification, you will have to. No, hear me out. That you do condition the dog emotionally to do its job in a muzzle. And what that you will seem to understand is that internally, because you rewired the canine's brain, the control center is operating on a whole deeper level. So the canine becomes neutral. And I'm not going to tell you that the higher the possession, the deeper these lines are that we're erasing. And we're taking that dog back into its original sight pictures that it came from. So I'm not saying that there's not some things that have to happen, and there does with a lot of them, because this possession is some bitch. Right, but it's in other ways. It's in different ways. But I'm just more expressing the fact that nothing changes, but you're emotionally, the dog is disconnecting from the engagement and doing the things that you asked from it. And that now that you have oneness and now that you have synchronicity, you're able to communicate in a divine way. And what is that way? Is life supporting life. That is the communication that I'm expressing. You don't get that in Primordial Pleasure. You get projections. You get egos. Ain't nobody supporting anybody. Anything besides themselves, including the canines, furthest away from this true self. There is so much confusion in that vibration. You're not getting life supporting life. And then you try to go to a neutral state, and that's what you get. You get mistakes, confusion, projection. So choices, the training that come in choices, is always in a muzzle. There's no suit work. Now, sure, you could apply in every facet. You could apply muzzle because you can work your bite released and have an understanding in a muzzle, but you shouldn't. And sometimes trainers go back to that, or handlers go back to that. For who? I'm going to get into the handlers here in a second. But choice training, where choices, where it's in a muzzle, and a canine has a choice. And I'm not going to get too much into this because this is also another day. But what choices look like would be, you have a child lay a track. And you have a child by a tree. When I say a child, just a child. You put on a muzzle because even in a real world, there's always things that could happen, right? But we'll never back down from any time that where you could support life. Meaning, say, my dog can't do that. My dog can't do this. So you put on a muzzle for the sake of accidents. But in training, you allow the canine to track, and you allow the canine to make the choice to engage the child or not. And what does the canine do? It decides not to engage. Is it the right choice? Yeah. It's the right choice because life supports life. Second time, same day, same environment, same day. I don't care. The typical bad guy, I don't care. Doesn't matter. Same arena, immediately following, doesn't matter. Or away today, it doesn't matter. Same situation, muzzle, same situation, and the adult is passive. But sight picture wise, that is typically the decoy. Does the dog make a choice? He does. What's he do? Well, what's the reflection of the environment? The guy is passive. Should the canine engage? No, because life supports life. Do it again, same dude. Do it again with the kid. Doesn't matter. Now all of a sudden, the vibrational state changes within that environment. What's the canine do? Does what it's conditioned to do within reason. Is that life supporting life? Yes. Where life doesn't support life is when I hear you say, well, my SOP says this and this and this before this happens. I'll give you an example within this, and there's so many things that'll be another day, but let's say my SOP is that I will cuff a person before I take the dog off. If that individual, regardless of what he's done in the past, that was 5 minutes ago, 2 minutes ago, is he vibrationally checked out? Whatever projection that you have, whatever mindset that you're in, meaning your egoic guideline that creates an imagination of the future of what could happen through your past experiences, somebody else's past experiences. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying, because I don't want to waste too much time on that. And that's where the choice of the canine, that's where you'll hear me say the dog has a choice. Is it right? Internally, if you look at where the dog is, closest to its true self as possible, is it right? If you give it a choice, some certain situations require specific things, and it's understood. I'm not knocking anything, but it's cued through the senses, the control center of the dog, by right. When a canine is in this state, and the handler is not in alignment. This is where accidents happen. But I will say that typically, if you rewire the canine's brain and the handler tends to reside back in its old ways, the canine will go back in its old pattern. Absolutely. And this is what's going to get me to this point right here. You send your dog to me. I'll rewire the dog's brain. We'll get him in this dimension of flow, synchronicity, in tune, telepathy, internally becoming neutral, internally becoming a reflection of the environment in a neutral state. Sure, in a controlled state, there's going to be some weird things that you're going to have to get used to. There's going to be some changes. So you think that you drop your dog off and you say, I'm good, man. And hey, I'll take this and... No. While your dog gets dropped off, you're coming with me. After I see the control center on where we're at, and I start synchronizing with your dog, I start having an understanding what's happening. It'll take 3 days, 4 days, if that. Your dog doesn't get to go home with you every day. Your dog gets to go and do a sounding bowl, right? There's your dog's eating different things. Your dog's in a whole nother environment that's for himself. After a little bit of time, 2 days, 3 days, that mirror gets placed in front of you. Now, I'm not going to tell you that we're going to make miracles, we're going to make strides, and like, no. But there will come to a level of understanding. And that you're going to get dissected. And how is that? It could be many ways. You'll be shown the road. And if you continue to sustain, there's many ways. There are apps. You come every month. There's so many different facets to stay linked. Meditation is one of them. Synchronization just doesn't come with the handler and the dog. The handler goes through a process as well. And what that looks like, it's up to you. I don't care what you've done. I don't care what you've been through. I don't care what your opinion is on dogs. That's being spoken through the canine. Within this program, you meet back up with your dog. There's some recalibrating, understanding. You get to go in the control center. And that dog's going to show you the road. Through me. To you. And then we go from there. It's pretty simple. But when you reach this dimension, you won't have any words. Because there are none. If you made it this far in the podcast, much appreciated. More to follow, more videos, more things to come. Much appreciated. Thank you for the time and space, for all that is. Thank you.